Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to this month's webinar. We're so very happy to have Todd Bukowski with us. Todd has over 20 years of experience in food and pharmaceutical packaging in both R&D and operations capacities. He leads PTIS projects and programs on package development process workflow improvements, packaging development strategy, and sustainability initiatives, including food waste. He also monitors and tracks consumer, retail channel, sustainability, legislation, and technology trends as they pertain to packaging. Todd is the program lead for PTIS's sustainability initiatives and program leader at PTIS's Future of Packaging programs. Todd holds an MBA in supply chain management and a packaging degree from Michigan State University. So welcome, Todd. Take it away.
Great, thank you, Holly. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and with everybody. What we're going to do today here is take a look at where packaging is today and where it's headed into the future. We'll take a look at what are some technologies, what are some packaging examples that are really leading the way, and kind of understand how these are going to need to be scaling up through collaborations. The photo here is, it looks a little odd, but it's from a biking trip I was in Spain last year when we could travel. It's an example of at this peak of this mountain, as you get to the peak, it's a lookout, and it was throughout Spain, there were these sortation bins for food waste, for corrugated, for plastics, for paper products, for glass and aluminum. And it was in the most remote areas, and it would also be in very urban areas as well. So they would have these by the bus stop. If you're in a rural, it might be the one bus stop in the whole town, but there was this collection here. And I think the kind of the theme today is we need to be thinking a little bit differently for how we're going to get some of our packaging back and what are some of those technologies that are going to enable that. Going through our agenda today, we'll look at what are some of the tools that we use for foresight and looking into the future. What's our current state of packaging? Where are we today? What are some of the sustainability drivers? And then really get into some of these technology impacts and industry challenges that we have. There's a lot of challenges out there. If there weren't, we wouldn't be on a webinar like this trying to understand, because we'd have solved it. And there certainly are an awful lot of challenges, but there's a lot of things that are really going on that are going to help us in a packaging standpoint, in technology and collection to really get us to where we need to be at that next stage. So just really quickly, a quick overview of PTIS and who we are. We're a packaging consulting group. Everything we do is based in packaging. We're in our 19th year. We really work completely across the packaging value chain. So that could be raw material suppliers, packaging converters, those companies that make packaging, brand owners that sell the products, food service providers, and so forth. A lot of our work tends to be in around technology scouting, helping companies understand where new technologies are, packaging strategy, sustainability strategy, and foresight, which is where we really look to understand where things are going into the future. And that's a component we have through our Future of Packaging program. And just really quickly about this program, because I'm going to be referencing it a few times, because some of the slides and data we'll have is from our Future of Packaging program. So it's a collaboration we've been doing with a group called Leading Futurists, who's a futurist consultancy. Some of our founders actually started working with them back in 1997, but we've been partnering on a Future of Packaging program every 3 years since 2004. We had our last program back in 2019, and it's a 3-meeting program, and it really is meant to look at what's going on around packaging technologies, regulations, sustainability, retail technologies, consumer trends, a whole bunch of different programs as they pertain to packaging. And then we visited sites in Austin, Texas, the capital factory where a lot of collaboration and startups take place. We visited Microsoft in Redmond, Washington, and a number of got to view their home of the future, their office of the future, and took a tour at a Kroger store where they're implementing a lot of Microsoft technology that's really helping from a sustainability standpoint and from a retailer standpoint with packaging. And then finally, we were at Villanova University for a hackathon with students and some external speakers who are really up on where things are going in the next decade. So it's a program that we try to collaborate, and we have we do every 3 years. So the last one was 2019, and we'll have one coming up in 2022 as well. So we're now going to get into what are some of these tools for foresight that we use. When I talk about foresight and the direction we're going, the drone here is sort of a symbol of how we see things moving a bit. Walmart just announced, I believe it was last week, that they are going to start testing and actually doing commercial drone deliveries in Fayetteville, North Carolina, on certain household goods and grocery items. You just think, I mean, 6 years ago would have been pure fantasy, but we are now starting to see some of these type of tools like this really come into fruition. And you figure from a packaging standpoint, it's a whole new delivery channel. It's a whole new way where you have to protect the product. There's probably going to be size constraints. So some of these are the components that we try to think of where things are going in the future and what some of these impacts could be. So right here is sort of talking about foresight. So the definition is, it's the ability to predict or the action of predicting what will happen or be needed in the future. And what we try to do is a lot of companies really have a plan of looking out, maybe 3 years or 5 years. But what we want to do is really stretch that out over 10 years, 20 years with scenario planning. Start thinking about what could the world be like. And if you start to think about that, it starts to widen your view. And that view often is not at the packaging level. It's really looking at things around, bioeconomy, risk, climate change, feeding the world, the Industrial Revolution. And then we work back more toward the center of the axis of what do these steps mean for packaging over the next 0 to 3 years, 5 to 10 years. Time frames. And what we really try to do is there's a quote from Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player, who said, I don't skate to where the puck is going to be. I skate to where the puck I skate to where the puck is going to be and not where it has been. Sorry about that. I'm screwing up his quote. And that's what we really try to do with packaging is think about where we're going to be in the future. Another tool we try to use is going from bad VUCA to good VUCA. So bad VUCA being, you're thinking about the future and the view is it's volatile. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of complexity. There's ambiguity. So we don't actually take action on that. So by using foresight and different tools and developing a strategy for companies, we really strive to get toward good VUCA. This is what's our vision, our understanding, the clarity and agility, so that we can start to take steps so that we can shape that future as opposed to kind of being paralyzed by the future and not knowing what steps to take. So that's why scenario planning and looking out further really is an important step that we want to take. So really quickly, we're going to look at just a couple slides of where we are at the current state of packaging. So we can kind of figure, this is our base today, where do we want to be in the future? This is another example of some of these bins that are in Spain. Now this was in downtown Barcelona, and the core of the city, if anyone's been there, it's very old. It's not meant really like our cities and suburbs today, wide streets, spaces for collection bins, alleys in the back of apartment buildings for collection. What they've done here is put these same sort of bins, but in the downtown environment, actually in like where parallel parking spaces would be. So as consumers come out from their apartments and condos, they will sort the recyclables right there in the middle of the street rather than leaving them out in the street or everything going into a trash collection, they've really started to develop this system for infrastructure for collection. So our current state of packaging, where we are today, a lot of the focus has been on value, convenience, how to make it more portable, what's the experience, how to make it quickly. Sustainability's been there, but it's often in the background of the discussions or the planning. A lot of times from a marketing standpoint, we're looking, how can we make it as convenient and as cost effective as possible for consumers? Packaging is expected to grow about 3.5% over the next 5 years in the US. And actually globally, plastic packaging is growing even at a faster rate of about 4%. One of the things that we've seen is that the pandemic has certainly brought a lot of focus on safety and components like tamper evident, elements that packaging actually does a very good job with. But it also has heightened a bit on sustainability and some of the impacts there. As we all collect items from e-commerce, or if we go to our grocery store, we can no longer use reusable bags. A lot of them have forced use of single-use plastic bags. Components like this that has kind of heightened as you end up building some of these materials back at your house. There's also a lot of focus on sustainability planning that we're seeing from different companies. A lot of brand owners are setting goals that all their packaging will be recyclable, reusable, or compostable by 2025. A lot of this driven by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and some of the goals that companies and even packaging producers and converters are setting goals that align very closely with these Ellen MacArthur Foundation goals, as well as their customers, the brand owners. We're also seeing a lot of movement and structure on legislation, and we'll get into some of that a little bit later. And then e-commerce and delivery packaging certainly is heightened. The photo here is it's an organic cereal that I purchased online. It was 6 boxes of cereal, came in a box that was then put into another corrugated box. And it was, an awful lot of packaging in this instance. I'd also purchased one that was in a flexible pouch where they were nested together. And honestly, that pack format came in and it was probably 1/3 the size of the case that came in with this cereal. So just an example of where designing for the environment, designing for the channel can have some significant implications there. A couple of the main sustainability models that we hear about today are circular economy and sustainable materials management. Circular economy largely is focused on things that are recyclable, how do we get them back, components that are reusable, and certainly thinking about the feedstock and the material that we're using. Is it a bio-based material? Is it more of a new carbon? Sustainable materials management is focused largely on how efficient can we be with our resources, using less material, reducing the amount of material overall, the carbon emissions, maybe the amount of water used. And these two principles can have very dramatic differences in what type of packaging selection we make. If you're focused on circular economy and say you're packaging pasta sauce, maybe it goes into a glass jar because that package has, it's reusable, it's recyclable. If you're focused on sustainable materials management, a flexible pouch would be perhaps the way you'd go, in that it has a carbon impact that often can be 1/3 that, or even less than that of a glass jar. So you can see it really drives to dramatically different decisions. Ultimately, our goal is to merge both circular economy and sustainable materials management principles together. The reason we're in and talking about packaging and the plastics is if you look at this recycling chart here, there's a very big focus on plastics today. And if you look at the chart, HDPE, which is your milk bottles and some of your laundry detergent jugs, PET containers, which are the soda pop bottles, those are only collected about 1/3 of all of those produced are collected. And a lot of the PET bottles are then used in carpet fibers or in clothing. They don't actually go back into packaging. And then you have flexible packaging, which is down at about 4%. Corrugated would be at the opposite end of the spectrum here, in that it has a very high recovery rate of about 88%. It is many times reusable. Consumers find places to reuse. It's even reused in industrial applications for deliveries to stores. Some companies will reuse those. And then also it's a bio-based product. So you could make the argument that corrugated fits very well within a circular economy. Some of the plastic components aren't fitting as well today, and that's really where a lot of our focus needs to be in significantly raising those rates. One example is in flexible packaging, which is at 4% today. In British Columbia, Canada, they have extended producer responsibility laws, along with an organization, a producer responsibility organization, that really takes ownership of the supply chain and the recovery infrastructure. And they actually have gotten their flexible packaging collection rate to over 20% today. So, 5 times where we are currently. So some examples of where we could be moving in the future. So we're going to touch on really quickly some of the sustainability drivers. These are the drivers that are impacting the direction we're going and some of the decisions that we're going to be making. Some of the drivers, certainly we see it from a consumers. The LOHAS consumer is the lifestyles of health and sustainability. These are the lead user consumers, the ones who are looking specifically for packaging that might be compostable or reusable, the zero waste kind of packaging. A lot of laws and regulations coming up, components like extended producer responsibility. In Europe, in parts of Europe, they are looking at a 30% tax in the UK on packaging that does not contain, I believe it's about 30% post-consumer recycled content. Companies from a risk management standpoint, so investors and investment firms are looking, do you have a sustainability program in place? Are your materials have a supply chain that is safe and that those products will be in existence in a number of years? And social transparency, we all know with social media, the impacts there. Certainly, companies don't want to be caught being with greenwashing and so forth. So that leads to a number of packaging implications and strategies. Components like, how do you make that decision of circular economy versus, or often with, sustainable materials management components? Who are you going to collaborate with? What's the consumer communication? How do you communicate your sustainability implications and strategy, and what consumers do with your product at its end of use? As your product and other components that companies are starting to have to consider, things like reusability, their sustainable packaging goals and how you report those out, and certainly life cycle assessments, using that to make more informed decisions on your different types of packaging. So now we're going to start getting into where packaging is headed. What's the direction that we're going to see? And some of these slides and the data will be coming from our Future of Packaging program. So this is an example of a survey that we did last year. And we had 146 responses. It's from a curated group. We don't just do an email blast or put it out on the web. It's from people within our network, high levels and organizations, really those that have been either through our Future of Packaging program or are leaders at a number of organizations, whether it be packaging suppliers or brand owners. And about half of the respondents were from North America. The other half were from other parts. 40% of everybody surveyed tended to have global responsibilities. So there was they ended up having responsibility and having to consider just beyond their own walls and really what are some of the decisions being made in other parts of the world. So the first question here we posed is, what's going to be really important to get to this circular economy vision where packaging is brought back and reused? The things that popped up at the top: government mandates on recycling, recyclable products, having new technologies at the MRF, so the material recovery facilities, things like artificial intelligence, optical sorters, robotics. These are all going to really be important in the next decade as we try to increase the efficiency to drive the value of collected recyclable material much higher than it is today. And then the third was limiting packaging so that it's focused on recoverable or reusable, recyclable materials. So trying to pare down those structures that are not necessarily as easily recycled and focus on those that can be more easily collected was what came out. The other question is, we asked, who's going to drive this circular economy vision? Somebody needs to be taking the lead on this. And it was interesting that government came up at the top, and it really came up the EU government. And I think anybody who follows the EU and some of the legislation that's going on could see why that's the case. They have a packaging directives, they have a circular economy components and vision, they have specific targets for each type of packaging material and how it needs to be collected, what recovery rates. And they have a lot more focus on developing that infrastructure. The second that came up were brand owners, those companies that are specifying the materials, often closest to the consumers. And these really came up as the two guides, the two areas that are going to provide that leadership. One that surprised us a little bit, honestly, was China came up at just over 5%. Back in 2018, when China implemented their national sword policy, which really prevented companies in North America and Europe from sending our recyclables that admittedly had high levels of contamination over, and China said, we don't want it anymore, really upended the world market on recyclables, dramatically dropped prices because we ended up having a glut of materials, but it's also causing us to really take a look at and develop domestic infrastructure for collecting, sorting, reprocessing, and having end markets in both North America and Europe that we weren't really relying on in the past. So in a way, it's really opened up an awful lot of eyes to opportunities there. This is a model that we use a lot, and it's kind of that sustainable packaging journey that companies go on. And almost everybody, when you're starting on your sustainable packaging journey, and the bottom left of the screen here, the starting point is looking for how do you get to recyclable materials? Maybe how do you get to lightweighting? A lot of these can also be kind of some cost savings components, because as you lightweight, often the packaging materials are less costly. Companies then move to what we call the getting serious stage. So these are, you start looking at, is there a refillable project? Maybe we do a concentrated product. So you think of how laundry detergent has really been concentrated an awful lot so that the water in the washing machine is often used for adding the liquid component to it. They're much more concentrated products. You have cleaners that you can be with a refill component now. There might be some compostable packaging. You're looking at a bio-based structure and seeing if it can be composted or does it have a fit and really align with one of your brands. These tend to be programs that maybe companies will do across a brand. It may not be across their whole portfolio of products. It may be, it's sort of a showcase project, proving out that yes, these technologies work and we can use them. The next step, and this is where we're really getting to today, is this transformational or big system. These are areas where no one company can really take ownership. It's really got to be the entire value chain working together. And it's often players that you don't work with. So, if you're a flexible packaging company, you're often not working with those that are working on the sortation or the collection of packaging. But it needs to get back. And so really coming up with these type of collaborations to enable that circular economy. Things where you have biopolymers that have a much better performance, but they're at a lower price, and they start to get to that level that where they can compete with, petroleum-based fossil fuel products. Composting, and then the infrastructure for composting. Again, no one owns that today, but it's going to really be driven by food waste. And if we start to get composting where food waste is collected and picked up, there's opportunities for compostable packaging in food service, certain areas at home where it could be collected and picked up. But we have to have the right infrastructure in place to really make these work. And certainly thinking about recovery in emerging markets, a lot of our microplastics issues today are really driven by not having packaging collection and infrastructure in emerging markets. So a lot of big things are going to happen in this transformational or big system strategy that we're looking for in the next decade. And we're starting to see a lot more of that collaboration than we ever had today. We're going to look at quickly now some of the industry challenges. So what are some of the things that are holding us up from really getting to that circular economy and where we want to be today and where we want to go into the future? This slide looks very jumbled and busy, and it's true. It is a jumbled, busy challenge for us. There are a lot of components here that we really need to be working on in order to integrate all packaging into a circular economy. Components like infrastructure investment. So there we're talking about getting collection bins for everybody and carts where there is recycling taking place. Because right now there's a big chunk, even in North America and the United States, where there is not recycling infrastructure. Or maybe there's bins, but we don't have the carts, and it's not big enough to really hold the amount of materials that consumers are putting out there. There's a sortation and investment in material recovery facilities for the MRFs, the artificial intelligence, the optical sorters, and some of the other technologies that we'll get into in a couple of minutes. And there's brand owner sustainability goals. Having goals and adhering to buying enough PCR, post-consumer recycled content, will really help drive that market. Right now, post-consumer recycled materials cost significantly more than virgin materials, and that really makes it difficult for recyclers because they don't have an end market necessarily to sell the products. We're starting to see a lot more brand owners have specific goals and state that they will be adhering to specific levels of post-consumer recycled content going back into their packaging. These type of things will really play a huge role in helping us get to that circular economy. But if you look at this list, we're really going to need to end up hitting and addressing every one of the items on this list to get to that sustainable circular economy model. I'm going to start looking now at some technologies and what are some of the technology impacts here. So one of the questions, again, that we had through our Future of Packaging survey was, what are the top scientific advances that are going to really influence packaging over the next decade? And the question wasn't meant to focus on sustainability, but the top two things that came to the top: recycling and end-of-life technologies. Again, focusing on that MRF, or maybe it's the composting component. And then bio-based or renewable feedstocks, so that we're starting to decouple away from fossil fuel based products. So kind of, if you think about it, if you start recycling and you start getting to bio-based materials, those feedstocks keep feeding in and getting reused in a circular economy. Now, there are limits to what we can do with mechanical recycling today, and that may be where advanced recycling or chemical recycling can kind of help fit. But these are some of the examples of where technology is really going to be focused. And sustainability, when we looked at our Future of Packaging program, kept rising to the top of, that was the main thing that everyone kept pushing for the next decade. So getting into some of the specific packaging examples, this first one on the left, the Digimark digital watermark, is one that we're really excited about. What it is we're all used to seeing a UPC code on a package. But what this does is it really hides and embeds a code that goes over the entire package. So you can envision being at a grocery store, the ability to scan at any side will make scanning much quicker and easier, particularly as we start to get into more self-checkout lines. But the other thing that's really exciting about this technology and where it plays in sustainability is it will allow, tied in with artificial intelligence and optical scanners, to be able to sort any package on the line and start to segregate. And you can segregate packaging from, this is food-based packaging versus non-food-based packaging. So those can be diverted. You could have PET, like a specific brand could get their material back. So for instance, Tide, if they want just orange bottles back, that could be segregated out using this technology. And a lot of this testing is going on in Europe right now, and a number of leading brand owners are starting to sign on. It's really some exciting technology there. On the right, designing for recyclability. This is an example of a flexible pouch. A lot of times flexible stand-up pouches are multi-materials. This is one that's made all of polyethylene, and it will allow it to be dropped off at the grocery store recycling bin. So a lot of us will have, if you take back plastic bags at the grocery stores, this is a pouch that can get put in there. And we're starting to see more of these type of higher barrier flexible pouches that will allow flexible packaging to be recycled at a store drop-off point. There's new technologies, a couple examples here, reusable packaging. Loop, probably many of you have heard of. It's reusable packaging. Often it comes in robust, like steel or aluminum or glass containers that end up getting reused, and you'll either send it back to Loop, who will clean it and then send it back to the brands that will fill it, or they're also setting up partnerships with companies like Kroger, Carrefour in France, where you can start to bring these back to Kroger and they'll be aggregated there and sent back to Loop for cleaning. The example on the right, next to it, Algramo. This is a refill station for Clorox or Pine Sol products. And these are where you would, almost like a vending machine, start to refill that package. Algramo started as a company in Chile, and with the goal of refilling packs primarily for consumers that couldn't afford a full size, they only needed a partial amount. But in an effort to really reduce the amount of packaging, they started setting up these mobile trucks and even bikes that could start to refill products for consumers. Paper-based packaging is another example where we're seeing some advancements. Here we're seeing Nestle with their Yes bar. A lot of candy bar wrappers are plastic-based. This is a paper-based candy bar wrap that can theoretically go into paper recycling. Diageo with a paper-based bottle here that will be coming out on their Johnny Walker that would allow it to go into paper recovery stream. A couple other exciting things. This one on the left, Uhu, it's a seaweed-based package that was given out at the London Marathon. And if anyone's run a running race, you'll notice that there's a lot of plastic cups from people getting drinks, and they throw them down and they keep on running. These are pouches that have a sports drink in them. You would bite it, get the sports drink, and then you could either consume the pouch because it's a seaweed, it's edible, or if it was left on the ground, it ends up biodegrading very quickly in rain and temperatures, and it didn't impact the sewage system. So it's a whole new way of kind of having a much more limited packaging impact and having almost an edible package. On the right is an example of a PHA compostable potato chip bag. This is PHA is an exciting polymer that has high barrier, which a lot of biopolymers don't today, and very high performance, and it kind of has the feeling and the structure of traditional polymers. Today, the cost is quite high, but as we're starting to get more applications and volume goes up, that can help drive down some of the cost for something like this. So getting some of these compostable structures out there. Another example here on the left, PCR from advanced recycling or chemical recycling. Berry Plastics, Sabic, and Mondelez with Philadelphia cream cheese in Europe. They're using advanced recycling materials that are then break it down to the monomer level, and then that can be put back into packaging for direct food contact. So the difference here is a lot of times components like, say, polypropylene are not recycled and used for direct food contact. By breaking it down to the polymer or monomer level, it allows us to reuse those products in the exact same application that they were used before. And then finally here on the right, design for disassembly. This is where we're starting to see brands communicate to consumers. These are 2 yogurt cups. Peel off the outer shrink band or the paper band and separate those so that the cup itself can be recycled. And it's really meant to help on the sortation phase down the line of you no longer have 2 materials, you've got 1 material to sort out. Now, how many consumers are doing that at this stage, I don't know. I think it's pretty low, but we're starting to see a lot more of that, and hopefully that'll start to play a bigger role in packaging design in the future. And then finally, there's an awful lot of collaborating taking place in packaging. Groups like the Recycling Partnership, which are investing in the recovery infrastructure in the US. CFlex, Circular Economy for Flexible Packaging, have launched the design guides and best practices for flexible packaging recovery in Europe. Alliance to End Plastic Waste is an example of a lot of plastic producers coming together and some brands coming together and looking at different technologies and investments in infrastructure for collecting plastics, a lot of times from an ocean standpoint or prevention, or focusing in emerging markets in Southeast Asia where there's not as much collection infrastructure today. So a lot of collaborations really taking place. And as we talked about with our Future of Packaging program, we really looked at a wide range of products, components that could influence packaging over the next decade. But really at the center, what it all came back to was the Internet of Things or Internet of Packaging. So being able to trace that traceability, the authentication of packaging throughout. E-commerce, certainly a big growth area, and an opportunity for new package design, and circular economy, sustainability. Those are really at the heart of where we see packaging design and packaging as a function going in the next decade. So, as we start to think about and wrap up here, there's, if you're a brand owner or a packaging converter, we really need to start tracking what are we putting out on the market so we can start to measure those and measure our progress against those over time. So what kind of bio-based content are we putting out? What's our carbon emissions for different packages as well as for our overall operations? There are new kind of components like a circularity indicators as a new metric that Ellen MacArthur Foundation's put out. How much can that package be reused, recollected, recirculated back into another product or continue to be reused? How does our package design impact or decrease, hopefully, food waste? And if it's for food waste, can the package potentially be composted if it's in a food service type of application? And then looking at processes and tools. So using foresights, how can we think about going from bad VUCA to good VUCA so that we're actually putting investments in shaping technologies that can get us toward that good VUCA? Looking at legislation tracking, life cycle assessments tools so that we can make a very informed decision about what are the trade-offs between different packaging options. Communicate that with our marketing team to help them understand, hey, if we want to be targeting our goals that we've set as a brand to have our packaging recycled or composted or reused, what are we doing? And certainly have some of those metrics. And then certainly thinking about that scenario planning of where things are going out in the future. So a lot of processes and tools that we can use along with specific metrics that can help. So wrapping up, there's a number of sustainability drivers we all saw. Packaging certainly is going to be facing a lot of challenges in this next decade as we really look to integrate circular economy principles with those sustainable materials management principles. We're going to likely see a lot more legislation in the future coming at us. We have to understand that technology, so we went through a lot of technology components. Technology alone is not going to be able to solve and get us to a circular economy. It's going to be the combination of technology, brand owners setting appropriate goals, pulling in PCR content back into their packaging, consumers underpinning with policy that makes sense and is meant to influence and drive sustainable decisions. All of these really working together will play a huge role in getting us to where we need. So there's no doubt the future of packaging really focuses on circularity, focuses on recycling, reuse, new business models that'll get us to where everything is collected and integrated back in as a feedstock for another product or another package, hopefully in the future. So with that, I know I went through a lot of stuff, was talking pretty quickly, and certainly would open up for any questions, discussion to everybody.
And we have quite a few questions here. First of all, Todd, thank you so much. What an interesting webinar that you gave for us. But here's one question. Regarding fees as policy drivers, recently the Recycling Partnership has proposed 2 fees to help accelerate recycling. A, packaging and printed paper fee paid by brands that would prioritize recycling-friendly design and provide funding for infrastructure, and B, disposal surcharge fee paid by waste generators to create a new source of funding to help offset recycling program operational costs and try to even playing field of low landfill tipping fees. ACC has come out in support of these as well. Do you get a sense that this type of legislation will have legs and be implemented in the U.S.?
I would have said, if asked a year ago, 2 years ago, there was a lot more opposition. I think we are starting to see groups like American Chemistry Council, groups like the Consumer Brands Association are putting out policy papers and actually starting to recognize that in order to get packaging in a circular economy, we're going to need a lot of infrastructure investment. And part of that's really going to have to come from fees that are put on the packaging industry. Part of the fees that I think that were mentioned there and the Recycling Partnership is mentioning fall under extended producer responsibility. Part of them also fall under what they call eco-modulation fees. And so that if you have a product or a package that might be very light, it may, but isn't recyclable or easily recycled, there may be a higher fee put onto that type of package in order to help fund that infrastructure. So I do think that, yes, we are going to see a lot more of this. States certainly have been looking at it. California was, Maine have been 2 states that have been very prominent. And then also there's legislation in the US, I can't remember if it's the House or Senate, that is looking at Break Free from Plastics Act is what it called. That also was very much aligned with extended producer responsibility type principles.
Okay, great. Another one. The Spanish examples are interesting, but personal willingness to sort materials is a barrier. Can you comment, please, on the recent Danish study on this issue and how to drive higher participation in sorting?
I'm not familiar with the Danish study, unfortunately, so I can't comment on that part. I do know that certainly in the US, we have largely gone down the path of single stream recycling and really letting the MRFs handle it all for us. That is a bit of a challenge, as we've also ended up with a lot more contamination in products that shouldn't be recycled. There are a few places, I know a couple in northern Michigan, that have dual streams, so you still sort out your paper products versus your glass and plastics, and they'll have multiple streams there. But by and large, we've really gone down the path in the US to single stream. The one area that, largely across the nation that we do ask consumers to take to a drop-off location or flexible packaging, and that goes to the grocery store drop-off centers. But even that, the participation rate is pretty low, and consumers are confused about what flexible packaging can or can't be dropped in. So programs like the How to Recycle symbol certainly help. I think over time, technology will also help us, so that Digimark code that we saw, that I mentioned, that can be used at the MRF, that could also be easily integrated in with your smartphone or your digital assistant, say, an Alexa at home, that could scan that type of code. So I think technology will be another area that will help us over time. In the meantime, I think components like How to Recycle and consumer communication education will really be important to make strides there.
Yeah, because one of the questions that was here was someone's wondering, I was wondering for compostable packaging if consumers would know to put the packaging in a compost bin marked as compostable, or is it meant to be composted in the landfill?
Yeah, compostable packaging is certainly a challenge. Consumers don't know, some think, oh, if I just leave it out in litter, it'll go away, which isn't really the case. Others don't know, they think if you put it in a home compost that it may, but a lot of home composters, you don't get to the temperature and the heat necessary to break down that packaging, so it has to go to an industrial compost. So where compostable packaging generally works best is, today at least, is in closed loop venues. So say like a stadium or a college campus, where all packaging may be, you could buy most of it being compostable packaging. And then it could all go in with food waste. Then you have a chance of compostable packaging playing a big role. The other challenge right now is a lot of composters don't want compostable packaging. It doesn't break down in the same time frame as, say, food waste or yard waste, even if it is certified as compostable. So I think there's some work going on with the Biodegradable Products Institute, working with industrial composters to understand some of those challenges. And so I think in the upcoming years, this is another example of one of these collaborations coming together that might be a non-traditional collaboration, where they're coming together also with the producers of compostable packaging to understand what can we do to help it be collected and used and accepted in compost facilities.
Thank you. That's interesting. Since chemical recycling is not currently recognized for determining the recycled content under existing regulations, is there any movement by authorities to adjust the regulations to accommodate this emerging technology?
Well, I think what we've seen is in a couple groups in both Europe and North America are setting standards on how to engage in traceability for chemically recycled or advanced recycled materials. So they're setting up specific standards. I know the Sustainable Packaging Coalition is a group that's done some work there. I know American Chemistry Council they're involved with trying to do something like that, and as well as taking place in Europe. So I think what we're seeing are these traceability standards emerge that are going to help with understanding, because obviously once you start merging chemically recycled monomers with virgin monomers, you start to lose a little bit of that. But technology like blockchain that's coming up is going to help kind of follow that link in where things are coming from within the supply chain. And that traceability will be a lot more transparent in the next 5 years as these standards come on board. So these standards may actually be moving a little bit more quickly than some of the legislation at times.
Thank you. Someone says, great presentation, Todd. Imagining that you are a consumer products company, what is the first thing you do to get started on the journey toward making your products packaging more sustainable?
Well, first I would look at, is there an end market? I think it's almost thinking about what's that end point. The packaging decision is almost always, it depends. because any product that's, if you don't design your packaging that the product gets to the end point, it's going, the product usually makes up 80 to 90% of the carbon footprint for a lot of products. And the packaging tends to be in that 5 to 10% range. So the packaging is protecting it. But to be sustainable, can you design for recycling? So even thinking about flexible packaging, can you get it to be a polyethylene-based pouch that at least can be recycled in the store drop-off bin? Can I put on a code like a Digimark code, or get involved in groups like Digimark and some of the collaborations, the Holy Grail project in Europe that is looking at Digimark, because that's going to help other parts of the value chain. That's going to help the sortation chain. And if you help sortation get sorted out much more, segregate products easily, that helps the reprocessing stage because they have a cleaner stream. And all of those help then, if you have a cleaner stream, you can have a much more cost-effective end market. So it's really thinking about what can you do to help that next stage in the value chain so it can be collected, it can be sorted, and it can be reprocessed. And, it may start to look at, do you start to get out of some materials that aren't as readily accepted in curbside programs or accepted, and start to pare down your packaging if there are alternatives out there.
Okay. You had a long list of industry challenges listed. What do you feel will be the biggest challenges?
One that stands out to me is right now there's a lack of ownership across the supply chain. So no one really owns. So we don't have, it's all very disjointed where we're making investments in collection, sortation, reprocessing technologies. And I think what you see that comes out in locations that have an extended producer responsibility law is that forces fees that go on to the brand owners. The brand owners, what they typically do is set up a producer responsibility organization or a pro, and that pro really starts to kind of help guide, once those fees get collected, where's that investment take place? And so I think today in North America, we don't in the United States. In Canada, there are pros. They are set up usually province by province. In the US, certainly if a state like California were to set up EPR, there would probably be a California-based pro. Ultimately, I think the general thought across the industry is that if we had one law of EPR that came across all of the United States, maybe you get one producer responsibility organization, or maybe there's a couple, but they start to help with that ownership phase of as being a challenge, because right now it's very disjointed who owns it and who's making those investments. And I think flexible packaging is an area that's going to be challenged, but I see there's a lot of positive steps taking place in that development of recyclable structures with higher barrier, because I think flexible packaging, if you can get recyclable materials, you also have that very strong sustainable materials management story with it. So there's a lot of positive reasons to be using flexible packaging, but it's getting it designed so it can be collected and sorted. So those are a couple of the big challenges.
Okay. What do you see for the future for refillable packaging, and will that play a major role in changing how products are sold?
I think refillables, the jury is still out in the US today. I know the Loop program is coming out, it's expanding. I think we don't have enough data yet to really know how many times we get these packages back. Because if you make a package from aluminum or stainless steel, it often requires significantly more resources to make that. Now, it can be reused and recycled, but are we getting those back for cleaning from the consumers? We don't know yet if mainstream consumers will take, as these packages get reused, there's going to get scuffed up. Maybe the branding is not as pretty as it was when it first came out. Certainly consumers that are buying into Loop, these are the lead kind of probably fit that low-cost type of consumer. They're accepting it and willing to go that route. But we don't know yet how mainstream that will be. I think we'll see more reuse. I just don't know how much yet.
What type of technology holds the most promise to really have a major impact on packaging in the circular economy?
One that we're excited about is we think the Digimark barcode, because that has a lot of potential. This digital watermarks, that hidden barcode that we showed earlier, because that can help at the retail level. It can certainly help at the consumer level, like I said, of scanning it and knowing where you can recycle a product. And it certainly does at the material recovery facility. So I think that's one that really stands out as a potential big change. Advanced recycling certainly has the potential to really make a big impact. We just don't know yet how big of that impact it's going to be. At this point, it's more costly and it does have more energy use, but it could really be a great way to capture more materials for recovery and get things into a very clean stream that can then be used back into food packaging. So it does hold some great promise.
Great. Well, I think that was our last question. I know that people do have more questions, but I know that you have an email displayed here and people can email you directly. I think you've given us quite a bit of food for thought. And so thank you for a wonderful presentation, Todd. And best of luck to you in helping us all with recycling in this, or better packaging in this world.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye.